Okay, so thanks everyone for joining the call today. My name is Paul Gallagher. I'm head of the media and events for the Meath branch of Birdwatch Ireland. And we have organised this call as part of our campaign to make 2020 the year of the year of the birds of prey. And the reason for that was after the poisoning of Mary the hen harrier in Nobber of this year, we decided that it was an issue that obviously was in need of educating more people about the role that birds of prey have in our ecosystem. And for that reason, I reached out to a number of people to give talks on the subject, and Fiona McAuliffe was one of them. Fiona has done research on, or had done research on the Golden Eagle, for the Golden Eagle project and the Irish Raptor study group. It was looking at ways of expanding the Golden Eagle population that's currently was originally released in Donegal, and looking at the different prey that they eat and possibly the limits to their expansion around the country. So I might give it over to you, Fiona, now just to give a brief introduction of yourself, and we can start then.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Thanks very much for inviting me to give this talk this evening, and I hope everyone's keeping safe and well at the moment. So my project was a master's thesis at Queen's University Belfast, and it was in partnership with the Irish Raptor Study Group and Golden Eagle Trust and National Parks and Wildlife Services. So just a bit of background about myself. That's me up in the top right hand corner there. And I grew up on a dairy farm in Duhallow in County Cork. And I suppose this gave me an early love of the outdoors and love of nature. So then following this, I went on to study zoology at University College Cork. And then I did my master's at Queen's in ecological management and conservation biology, which this project was a part of. And then I worked as an ecological consultant in Kerry, where my main projects were hen harrier monitoring, Kerry slug translocation projects, and also carrying out appropriate assessment reports. And currently I'm actually in Edinburgh doing my PhD, which is investigating causes of lamb loss on Highland farms and crofts. And that's with Scotland's Rural College, the University of Edinburgh, and Scottish Natural Heritage. So I just thought I'd give a brief introduction to golden eagles. So they're a widespread species. They're spread throughout the northern hemisphere. And there's actually 6 subspecies of golden eagles, and our kind is the European golden eagle, which is Aquila chrysaetos. So it's Ireland's second largest raptor. The white-tailed sea eagle is the largest raptor in Ireland. And the golden eagle has a wingspan of over 2 meters, and females are larger than males, as is typical in most raptor species. So they usually live up to 23 years of age, and they'll start breeding at 4 years old. However, it usually takes a number of years before they become successful breeders. They have a wide dietary breadth, as shown in their wide distribution. So in the northern tundras, they would take larger prey and usually like ptarmigan and maybe even forage on carrion such as reindeer. And then down in the south, you'll also have them in, we'll say, the desert habitats of Oman and Middle East, where they might actually prey on tortoises. But the main prey species for our golden eagles are the red grouse and the Irish hare. So during the 19th century, it's thought that there were about 50 pairs of golden eagles throughout Ireland. However, they became extinct in 1912 following extensive persecution and large changes to the habitat. So prey transects carried out in the 1990s by National Parks and Wildlife Services identified northwest Donegal as the best habitat available for golden eagles, and they even showed that it was equivalent to some of the better regions in the west of Scotland. So following this then, in 2001, the Golden Eagle Trust started the Reintroduction project, where they sourced donor chicks from Scottish nests under license from Scottish Natural Heritage. So they brought chicks from nests which had 2 chicks, leaving 1 chick in Scotland for the parents to rear, and bringing the second chick then to Glenveagh National Park in Donegal, where they were reared in release cages and then later released. 2007 saw a milestone with the first Irish-born chick to fledge the nest successfully in over 100 years. And our latest update is that in 2019 there were 3 pairs, and these produced 1 chick each, which added to a total population of 25 to 35 eagles in Ireland. However, populations have not reached predicted targets of 7 to 8 pairs by 2007. Last year there were 3 pairs. So this low breeding performance could be linked with a suspected deterioration of available prey and upland habitat quality. So this photo here is just that first chick to be born in 2007, and she successfully fledged. So past studies have shown that prey abundance has been linked to golden eagle breeding success, with pairs which consume more live prey than carrion, which is dead prey that's scavenged, being more successful during the breeding season. And breeding success can be defined as the number of chicks fledged per pair per year. And on this graph here, you can see that as the live prey availability increases, so too does the number of chicks fledged per pair. So nest prey remain studies carried out in the Derry pair, which is in the heart of Glenveagh National Park, found prey remains such as fox cubs and also badger cubs, which indicate that there's likely a scarcity of their more typical prey items, the Irish red grouse and the Irish hare. So golden eagles are a species of upland open habitats, and 19% of Ireland can be said to support upland habitats. This nest here in the bottom left shows upland regions, and in Ireland we classify uplands as anywhere above 150 metres, so I've mapped those areas here. And then on the right hand side we can see European Annex listed habitats that are classed as the upland habitats, and these include blanket bog, Northern Atlantic wet heath, European dry heath, and alpine and boreal heath. And then just for reference, I've added Meath, the outline of County Meath here as well. These upland habitats have a long history of land use change, which includes undergrazing and overgrazing, conversion to forestry plantations, and also inappropriate burning regimes, all of which have resulted in changes to these habitats. So the Irish hare and the red grouse form a vital component of golden eagle diets. However, they themselves have also been undergoing long-term population declines. The most recent study of Irish hares found 3.5 hares per kilometre squared in 2018-2019. And this is down from 7.6 hares per kilometre squared in the previous study during 2007 for the Northwest region. And the last study of red grouse showed 1.2 red grouse per kilometre squared, also in the Northwest region, which holds over 90% of the national population of red grouse left. So hares require tall vegetation for shelter, but also fresh growth for food. So they're a nocturnal species. During the daytime, they'll build like a nest in the tall vegetation that's called a farm. And then at nighttime, they'll come out and they'll feed on the fresh growth. And then the red grouse depends on a dense cover of ling heather, which makes up over 95% of their diet. And they require various age structures, both for food and also for shelter and for building their nests within. So the aims and objectives of my master's project were to assess the upland habitat quality and the prey availability in the reintroduced golden eagle's core range in the Derry Mountains, and to quantitatively assess the vegetation community composition and structure to determine the abundance of both red grouse and Irish hares as available prey species, and to assess red deer as agents of overgrazing. So I just thought I'd include this photo for anyone who's familiar with Donegal. This is just to the northwest of the park, and that's a Muckish Mountain, which is a beautifully scenic area. So I carried out the survey sites at Clogher Bog and Glenveagh National Park Special Area of Conservation, which is located just up here in central Donegal. And I've outlined it here in red, although it's not too clear on my habitat map. So this area is characterised by a mosaic of upland habitats, including those annexed habitats of blanket bog, dry heat, wet heat, and also alpine and boreal heat in the particularly high up areas. So 12 1 kilometre squared study sites were selected, and 14 points were randomly generated within each of these squares. So this map here on the top right shows where my 12 study sites were located throughout the SAC. I've marked lowland sites in red and then upland sites in orange. And where camera traps were located are shown with black dots. And so camera traps were located within 7 of these 1 kilometre squared. And they were set to record videos of 10 seconds each when they were triggered by movement. And the cameras were left in situ for at least 1 week. And here's a photo of me just setting up one of these cameras. So they were mounted on highly sophisticated broom handles here. And I was just setting up a grid in front of it to take a reference photo. And if you're familiar with Glenveagh National Park, this is Loch Veigh. And the Glenveagh Castle is just down here. So that square would be this one up here. So each of those 14 points in, I walked vegetation and prey transects between them. In the 7 squares that had cameras, these transects were walked twice when the cameras were deployed and when they were collected again. And in the squares without cameras, the transects were walked just once. And along these transects, I recorded vegetation characteristics approximately every 50 meters. And this included species percentage cover, the height and density of the vegetation, and also the gramenite tussock frequency. And the gramenite species, those would be your grasses, your sedges, and your rushes. So I've just included some photos here of some of the more typical species. We've got lingheader, that all-important one for red grouse, and then also bellheader, tormentil, common cottongrass, and heath rush. So along the transects as well, I recorded indirect field tracks and signs of both red grouse and Irish hare. So this included actual sightings of animals, hare droppings, red grouse droppings, feathers, actually hearing birds call, and also red grouse tracks. So then I classed the red grouse droppings as either fresh or old, if they were a single roost pile or if they were a paired roost pile. The number of blind gut droppings and the presence of the clocker were recorded. So just to explain what those mean, this would be an example of a fresh roost pile. So it still has that white urea cap indicating that it's less than a month old. And the blind gut droppings, you usually find 2 per bird with a roost pile. So if you find 2 of all of this within 3 meters of each other, that will usually indicate a pair because they would roost together. This central photo shows an older roost pile. It's lost that white cap, so it's more than a month old. And then over here, I have the female clocker. So what that is when she's nesting, she doesn't want to leave the nest too often. So when she does, she'll leave the nest and do one massive dropping, we'll say. So by analysing all that dropping information data, where those were located in relation to the topographical features, I could tell how many grouse were within an area. So up here, I had a calling male. I found 3 of those female droppings, a fresh pair roost, and I also flushed a grouse. However, they were highly concentrated in this area, so that would likely just be 2 grouse within that kilometre squared. Whereas down here, I had a flushed grouse. I found some indications of a nesting female, and down here I also had roost piles, but they were older. So that would likely be 2, 4, 5 grouse. So just moving on to my results and discussion section here. I've just included this photo of the U-shaped valley in Glenveagh. So this is the Bridle Path, and if you ever do visit the national park, I highly recommend walking here, as you've got like some old oak woodland down in the valley, and it's just a beautiful walk on a nice summer's day. Well, hopefully when we're allowed to travel again. So all those vegetation characteristics, I recorded them at over 1,000 sampling locations along 62 kilometres of transects. So to break down all that data, we used principal components analysis to classify the vegetation characteristics into 4 categories. So this included PC1, which was made up of short and open vegetation, or bare ground where ling heather was absent. PC2, which was tall tussocks of black boggrass, where sphagnum species were absent, and sphagnum species are your peat building moss species, so they're essential for blanket bog habitats. PC3 was ling heather, where purple moorgrass was absent, and PC4 then was deer grass, where hare's tail cottongrass was absent. The camera trapping amounted to over 16,000 hours of survey effort and 44,000 videos, of which 0.2% were actually wildlife detections. The rest were actually wind-triggered vegetation movements. So that gave me 74 red deer detections. I had 1 Irish hare, you can spot him just up here, and then I also had 1 red grouse. And I just love this capture because it really shows how well camouflaged that female grouse is to her environment. So some other non-target captures I had included this female wheatear just in the centre of the photo. I had plenty of hooded crows parading back and over in front of my cameras. I also had some badgers, and this was actually where I showed you that photo earlier of where I was setting up the camera trap. So these badgers were about 300 meters high, which I just thought was interesting. I had a fox cub, and this camera must have been set up near the den, because I had loads of videos of the cub and the vixen coming up to feed it. So that was just, yeah, interesting to see again. Over in the east of the park, I had, near Churchill, I had some sheep sightings, and they particularly enjoyed the cameras, using them as scratching posts and knocking them over. So yeah, sheep were seen sometimes as well. And in one of my cameras, I got very excited about, because I had loads of nocturnal detections, and I said, oh, this must be Irish hare now. And no, it was a spider. So this spider had decided to build its web right in front of the camera and repeatedly trigger it in the middle of the night. So that was fun watching through all of those. And also, of course, hikers off on a nice evening stroll up the hills. So then, using these camera trap detections, we were able to find a density of Irish hares of 0.2 hares per kilometre squared in the upland areas. And then when I also included the lowland sites, this fell to 0.14 hares per kilometre squared. And this is actually 94% lower than the wider regional density of 3.5 hares per kilometre squared. And that study that was done in 2018-2019, they used similar methods to me with the camera traps. the only difference being really that they set their cameras onto fence posts or trees where they were available, as opposed to the stakes I had. So the red grouse densities, then we found a density of territory holding males of 1.7 per kilometre squared, and this was actually 39% higher than the 1.2 males reported during 2006 and 2008. However, we had similar or overlapping confidence intervals with that study, so we think that the population is slightly increasing or just largely stable. And so what does all this mean for our golden eagles? Bring it back to the main subject of tonight. So by taking the weight of both Irish hare and red grouse and finding how much of that is actually wasted, because the chicks can't eat everything. So for example, in this nest, you'll see the remains of 3 hares. You've got 1, 2, 3. So we take that away to find what's actually edible. And then by multiplying that by our density, we can find the live prey availability, which I found to be 1.6 to 2.5 kgs of prey per kilometre squared per year. And this is actually 73 to 83% less than the 9.2 kgs of prey per kilometre squared per year that's required to maintain the viability of the golden eagle population. And this is based on a territory supporting a pair of golden eagles, and for them to raise 0.8 young per year, which is to maintain viability, and for their territory to also support immature eagles from time to time. And we found a significant relationship between red deer numbers and one of my vegetation communities, PC1, which was areas of short open vegetation or bare ground where ling heather was absent. And this may indicate degraded upland habitats. So ling heather, which is essential for the red grouse and for both food and shelter, and which hare show a preference for in upland habitats, was significantly reduced or absent from areas with higher deer numbers. So overgrazing can cause drastic changes to upland vegetation, which results in the replacement of heather-dominated moorland with millennia-dominated rough grassland, which is just not as suitable for grouse or hares. So this photo here in the bottom left, you'll see the fence line, and Glenveagh National Park is actually one of the few fenced national parks left in the world. But so the deer fence typically keeps the deer within the park. And you'll see within the park, there's much reduced ling heather cover than outside of the park. And also outside, you'll see this natural regeneration of trees and woodlands. And here on the bottom right, this is a deer exclosure fence, although it's in need of some repair. But on the left, you have your deer. And so there's heavy grazing, which results in a lot of bracken cover and older woodland. Whereas on the right, you get that naturally regenerating native woodland. So I just thought I'd look at a case study then of the Oreen Duff Nephine Complex SPA. So this is an area that previously experienced overgrazing by sheep, which led to habitat degradation and a severe reduction in red grouse numbers. So following this then, in 2000, the European Court of Justice filed a case against Ireland for failing to implement the Birds Directive. So then National Parks and Wildlife Services destocked sheep and off-wintered the sheep, which then resulted in a reduction in the grazing pressure and subsequent habitat recovery. And following this, the numbers of grouse increased from 1.5 to 3.4 grouse per kilometre squared in 10 years. So this study shows that numbers of grouse can increase rapidly when management steps are taken to encourage habitat recovery. So the implications of this study show that the abundance of live prey for eagles can be reduced through overgrazing and competition with larger grazers. So frequent grazing and trampling by red deer results in the loss of ling heather and its replacement by grasses, sedges and rushes. as shown in this photo here on the left. Strategies which reduce the grazing pressure from red deer could be implemented in areas of the SAC in order to encourage habitat recovery. And improving upland habitat quality would result in greater live prey abundance, which could then increase the breeding success of the golden eagles. Current management practices and policies may be negatively impacting the growth of the golden eagle population. For example, undergrazing and overgrazing, inappropriate burning, and also conifer plantations reduce the suitability of upland habitats for this species. Management steps which promote the restoration of upland habitats and which maintains high nature value farmland could lead to the recovery of key prey species, not only for eagles, but for our wading bird species such as the curlew and also for our hen harrier. I've included this map here on the right, which shows areas of high nature value farmland. And you can see, if you remember back to my upland map, they link up quite well with our upland areas. So the darker green shows a higher likelihood of high nature value farming. And this farmland is what people would generally associate with marginal farming or more traditional farming methods. However, these upland habitats provide valuable ecosystem services, such as storing carbon in the peatlands, reducing flood risk, supporting biodiversity, but also providing recreation opportunities. So by improving the habitat and the prey base, this could lead to more chicks fledging, and then they themselves could join the breeding population in the future. So this is the distribution map for golden eagles that was recorded in the last breeding bird atlas. So you can see their densities in Scotland and also in Ireland. And in 2018, a translocation project began, which is reintroducing golden eagles to Dumfries and Galloway. And someday these juveniles from this population may travel to the east coast of Ireland and maybe even visiting Meath. So what do golden eagles actually require? They're usually nest above 150 meters, and they'll build their nests on cliff edges or in strong Scots pine trees. And then they'll typically forage at a higher altitude so that when they do catch prey, it's easier to transport this back downhill to the nest. They'll prey upon a wide variety of species, with particular emphasis then on the grouse, the hares and rabbits as well, form an important component of the diet. And the main obstacles to reoccupation are likely to be persecution and a loss of upland habitats and high nature value farmland to blanket afforestation. So just looking at Meath in closer detail then, the highest point is Slieve na Cally, which is 276 meters high, and it's just over here. I've mapped again the areas above 150 meters, and as you can see, Meath is a very low-lying county. And on the right here, I've included those upland listed habitats, and there's hardly any in Meath as well. These compose of mires and fens for the most part. So nearby uplands include the Cooley Peninsula in County Louth and the Mourne Mountains in County Down. So maybe with an expanding population of golden eagles, there could one day be a population within these uplands, and that's definitely worth a day trip visit from County Meath, I think. And I've included this study here by Evans et al. Because it's just such an interesting paper. They looked at place names, and particularly Irish place names, and associated them then with habitat features and topography to determine historical distributions of the white-tailed eagle in light grey and the golden eagle in the darker grey. And in areas of black show where there might have been potential overlap. So they did this for both 500 AD, when populations were likely at their peak, and in 800 AD. So you can see the, the golden eagle is again heavily associated with our upland areas. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like there's suitable breeding habitat in County Meath. So if the King of Birds does visit the Royal County, it might just be for a flying visit. Just to conclude then, in order to increase the population growth of golden eagles, a restoration programme may be necessary to improve the upland habitat quality and the numbers of key prey species. Otherwise, we may once again lose this iconic upland species from our skies. And I don't think anyone on the call this evening would like to see that happen. So just my acknowledgements then, I'd like to thank my supervisor, Dr. Neera Reid at Queen's University Belfast, and the Irish Raptor Study Group and the Golden Eagle Trust for their continuing support, in particular Ryan Wilson Park and Larkin O'Toole, and then also the National Parks and Wildlife Services and everyone else who helped me with field work for this project. And if anyone would like to get in contact, you can find me on Twitter at AllofOurNature, or you can send me an email here. So,
excellent.
Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Fiona, for that. Look, I'm just going to end the recording here. Let me just stop the recording there. And